see all of you. I'm dialing in from Washington, D.C. And for those of you who I don't know, I am an executive coach and leadership trainer here in Washington and have been spending most of my time doing virtual facilitation training and helping people convert their in-person experiences into the virtual space. So this is an hour-long session today on presence, on really thinking about virtual presence. What does that mean? How is it different from being in the room? How we ourselves are present, and how we help our participants stay present as well and keep them engaged. Full disclosure, this is typically a minimum of a 4-hour session. So 1-hour webinar, no problem. I'm from New York, so I can talk super fast. What I'm gonna do is break all of my rules in terms of user engagement. You'll never usually hear me speak for more than 10 to 15 minutes at a time without having you do something. But since we're in the webinar format, I'm gonna speak for the first 30, 35 minutes, and then we're gonna open it up for Q&A and have more of a discussion about ways that you can apply all of this learning. So while we're still waiting for a couple of people to get on the line, I'm just gonna ask you to each consider removing one distraction. It could be a window on your computer, it could be a pile, it could be closing a door, just something to help you be more present. And to also just take out a piece of paper with a pen or a pencil and like to actually write your purpose, your intention, just how you want to show up or what you want to get out of this webinar or this workshop. Just spend a moment there. Okay, so I'll be toggling back and forth between what we're doing and then kind of pulling back the curtain around what we're doing as well. And by the way, just to, yes, this is being recorded, and yes, you will get the slides after. I like to open up with this, first of all, just to help people get present. And the other reason why I like to do this is that people come into Zoom at different times. Hopefully we have everyone come in at 1 p.m. Eastern time, but there's people having a lot of things going on right now with homeschooling and pets and just other things. So I like to start with the first 2 or 3 minutes of helping people arrive, but it also gives that buffer that if people are coming on late, they're not missing anything that is enormous. On the other hand, I don't like waiting too long to get going with the content, because then I think it doesn't honor the people who did sign on exactly on time. So I like having that 3 to 5 minute exercise in the beginning to have something meaningful, to have something intentional for me to get present, for the participants to get present, but it also allows some of the stragglers to come in, not judging the stragglers, but allowing them to come in and still be a part of the group experience. So our objectives today for this webinar is to really think about just the idea of showing up and gaining confidence in how we teach and engage and facilitate online, and talk about our own leadership presence, and then also talk about how to help our participants become more present. And it's tough. It's tough when you're in the room, and it's all the more tougher when you're doing it online. And sometimes if you're doing this work in the afternoon, you have people who've been online on Zoom for 7 to 8 hours already and are pretty much Zoom beat out, as they say. So we have to work harder for people's attention and really be mindful of our presence and their presence as well. So our agenda today, oh, look at that. I'm a full hour behind you. I'm on Chicago time right now. So we are going to talk about starting now, getting centered. We're going to talk about our presence model and the mindset we want to have online. We're going to talk about some very specific tools for presence, and then we'll close at 1 o'clock, which is 2 p.m. Eastern time and 9 p.m. Israel time. Okay, so in terms of the agreements, our main form of communicating for this first half is going to be on chat, and Emily's going to be watching the chat for me to see if she needs to interrupt me at any moment of time for questions. We're going to ask everyone to stay on mute, to be open-minded, thinking about what you want to try that's new, thinking about what feels safe for you to practice in this area of presence. I will say take the break you need. In an hour-long webinar, we're not going to have a formal break. So if there's something you need to take care of, you are all self-sufficient adults. I trust like you take the break that you need and do the self-care that you need to do. I will say when it comes to participation, I usually like to start with this idea of 3 before me, meaning if you're speaking, can you wait until 3 other people speak before you speak again? It kind of goes off of the idea of take space, make space, which always sounds nice as an agreement, but what does that actually mean? I don't actually know what that means. So how do you ground it in something that's real? Some people need 4 before more. Other people need 10 before again because they just take up so much space. So just thinking about being mindful and conscious about your participation. And I always like to say, remember the raffle ticket. So you can go ahead and write in chat. If any of you know, what does it say on the bottom of any raffle ticket you ever buy? What does it say on the bottom of any raffle ticket you ever buy? You can go ahead and write it in the chat. Who's got an idea? Anyone know? You can take a wild guess. You must be present to win. You do not need to be present to win. Okay, actually, Sarah, you nailed it. You must be present to win. It's typically what it says on the bottom of most raffle tickets. And who knew that it was so deep, right? Like this idea of you must be present to win. Another agreement that's not on here is just the confidentiality piece. That's important to have in agreements around like what stays on this. If you're going to put confidentiality on there, what does that actually mean? No live tweeting, no name attribution to comments. If it's recorded, can the recording be shared? So thinking about that in terms of the agreements. Now, right up front with the presence, I will say that this is an important exercise, meaning this is a webinar style format. If I'm doing a webinar or if I'm teaching, I'm usually giving the agreements to the participants. If I'm doing more of a group facilitation or group work or teamwork, I often will have them come up with the agreements. The act of them coming up with the agreements makes them more invested in the call. It becomes more egalitarian. Having people make agreements, that could be an hour-long session that you're doing online, group norms, group agreements. So just to be mindful in terms of presence, depending on what kind of presentation you're doing online, it might be more appropriate for you to give the agreements to them, or in some cases, it might be more appropriate for them to be working through the agreements together so they're more bought in and invested in the actual agreements. Okay. So we're going to begin talking now about this idea of presence model. And what do I mean by a presence model? I always look at presence in these 3 areas of awareness, like that presence is a thing, right? Presence is actually a thing that you can work on. And just an awareness of what your presence is. I will quickly dispel 3 myths about presence. The first myth about presence is you either have it or you don't. So that's myth number 1. Any living organism has presence, even a plant, right? Like you have a presence by the fact that you are alive and in this world. Do some people have a predisposition towards it? Maybe, but everyone has a presence and everyone can grow in their presence. The second myth about presence is that you have to be tall to have presence. It helps. You walk into the room and you're 6'6", everyone can see your head. I can also tell you about some of our world's greatest dictators and villains who've all been under 5 feet tall. I can tell you about a 4th grader that gets up at a school assembly and has more presence in their pinky than most people we know. I could tell you about, you know, Dr. Ruth. I could tell you about many, many small, petite people who have enormous presence. What I want you to understand about this is that presence is not about height. Presence is about length. And it's how you embody the length that you have. Even more so when we're thinking about being online, and we're going to talk about this, we've now cut our presence in half. We have like from our chest up, right? So we don't even know how tall people are in this situation because for the most part, we're sitting down. So even more so, how do we use the presence that we actually have on this screen? The third myth that I want to share about presence is that the myth that to have presence, you have to be loud and funny and charismatic. And yes, that is one way to have presence. We also know people who have a quiet, searing presence where they, you know, they don't say much. When they do, it really sticks. Like just more of a different energy kind of presence, which is also very impactful. So there's many, many different ways to have presence. We want to talk about which way is your way. There's a whole other piece of presence that relates to body language and body work. which is very important and very interesting to think about in this moment of time when we have such little contact with people. And then there's the presence, which is around connection and the expressive communication, how we actually communicate with one another. So we're going to hit on all three of these in our short time together. And I just want you to take a moment and just read through these. These are just some different definitions of how we can understand presence. Just take a look at them for a moment and maybe think about which one resonates for you. Do any of these particularly resonate for you? Different ways of understanding presence. Would anyone be willing to take themselves off mute and maybe share the one that jumped out at you?
I'm happy to.
Great.
The one that resonated for me was the one that center Belle Halpern and Kathy Lubar, with the idea that I have found, particularly over Zoom, that I turn on in a different way when there are people around me, because I like sort of vibing off the energy of others and sort of seeing what they're feeling and sensing. And so somebody said, oh, you're just like Jimmy Kimmel, who can't play, you know, who can't perform in front of an audience. And I said, yeah, I guess that's right. I tend to do a lot better because I like to try to connect with people when I'm speaking with them. And I find it much harder to do over the Zoom platform.
Yeah, for sure harder. Not impossible, but definitely harder. And I also really love that one. I love all of these, but I love this idea of connecting authentically, and also that it's about motivating and inspiring them towards a desired outcome. That the idea of your presence, something about your presence is going to change something in others. The idea that presence is contagious. I used to say presence is infectious. I feel like I cannot use those words anymore. So I'm looking for new words, like it is transformative or relatable or past in some way, that our presence can have a deep impact on others and have a deep impact on the outcome that we're actually looking for. So it's just some ways to start wrapping our head around presence. And you know, and it really leads into this idea about mindset and how are you showing up. And I think that one thing that's important to know is that with our work right now, there is loss. We are not in the room with people. And for me as a professional facilitator, there's huge loss in terms of the majority of my work is done in the room. And the new mindset is what we do online, is it going to be like it was in person? And the answer is no. Is it going to be worse? The answer is no. Is it going to be different? The answer is yes. And that is like starting line. It is going to be different, and that does not mean that it has to be worse. It's just going to be different. And I think once we can accept that it's going to be different, but that doesn't necessarily mean worse, it opens up a world of opportunity. I'm even finding now that with the distance and being online, I'm actually seeing a lot of my students and clients are more open and more vulnerable because they have that distance of the screen. And they're allowing themselves to step in ways that maybe they haven't before. I'm seeing new opportunities of doing work in this way that's actually a bit more intimate and connected than maybe it even was in the room. So just embracing that new mindset. Another truism that I think is really important to think about here in our work is we are all having different experiences. We all need different things. That means out of life, out of each other, out of the learning that we're doing. We are all winning and losing inner battles that others don't know about, which is really important to keep in mind when we're doing this kind of distance work. And I think for me, the most important is for now is not forever. And noticing that, well, we don't know what the new normal will look like, but where we are right now and the situation we're in right now is not going to be forever. So how do we help people not only feel more comfortable in the for now, but trust that this is a moment, a long moment, and that doesn't mean that it's going to last forever. So how do we check into our own mindset and make sure that we are okay before convening and facilitating others? And this is a visual that I've always loved so much, this idea of what are we seeing when we look on the screen, right? And what are we believing? What are the thought habits that we're having? And what's the tape that's playing in my head? Like, I can't do work this way, or I'm not good at this, or they're going to discover I don't know what I'm talking about. Just what new thought habit can you be practicing right now in terms of your presence? So I will tell you that for me, this idea of adopting a new thought habit, in addition to my business that I run, I direct an institute at Georgetown that trains facilitators and coaches. And when I first learned that I had to take it online, I was like, I'm sorry, this is not something that we're going to do online. And then I was told that Georgetown was now closed until September. So guess who was converting their program to online? So after I had my little pity party, I have a saying, you can visit Pity City, but you're not allowed to move in. I had an extended stay in Pity City. And then I started working on, I have to do this. I don't have a choice. This is my job. I'm the director of this program. So I started doing it. And then I started having some small wins and realizing like, oh, okay, there are things that you can translate. And then sort of the next level of evolution was, I'm up for the challenge. Like this is really challenging, and it's stimulating and activating my brain in ways that I haven't been doing in a long time. And then the highest level of evolution in this, the I am-ness, is basically this. Like if I am a professional who preaches all day long about how to be in service to others, then being flexible and attending to my students' needs in this moment of time is actually an expression of who I am as a person and as a professional. Like this is how I want to show up in the world. Someone who can take adversity and make it creative and be in service to my students, that like, this is who I am. This isn't just what I'm doing in terms of converting my Georgetown program online. This is actually who I want to be in the world. And that's what allows you to get to the presence, is to sort of transcend the tactical, the tachlis, the minutia, and get into like, who am I here to serve? And what's the purpose? And if you can tap into that level of like practicing those thoughts, you show up very, very differently in this work. So just a couple more things, and then we'll open it up for some quick questions. Just again, we're in this awareness category, this state of mind. This is a tool that was created by one of my close colleagues, Alexandra Kaye. And it's a really neat way to just track how are you showing up? This idea of being fit to facilitate, or when you're showing up, like, are you finding yourself at a -3 right now? Are you finding yourself at a +2, a -1? I mean, these are just some examples, but can you really check into yourself in terms of how you're feeling? And can you check into the groups that you're working with? Maybe put a blank chart like this and ask them to fill it in and ask them to fill out like where they are. If I'm getting on a call and I'm seeing that my students or participants are all at a -2, I might need to make a quick pivot and do some sort of physical exercise or some sort of clearing, or I might need to change course because my people are not in the mood to learn about like fundraising in a pandemic. Like they're just in a place where they feel totally paralyzed. So checking into my state of mind around this and checking into their state of mind around this is, I find, to be a really good exercise. If I'm feeling like I'm at a -2 and I'm about to lead an 80-person session, I better figure out, what do I need to do right now in terms of self-care, whether it's deep breathing, slamming a Red Bull down, whatever it is, like what do I need to do right now to get myself to a better state of mind to show up to be the person that they need me to be in this moment. And that's not only for myself, that is following really important research that talks about, as I said before, a leader's state of mind is contagious. And if you just look at some of these ideas, right, roughly 50 to 75% of how employees perceive their organization's climate can be traced to the leader, and how in meetings, leaders have a profound influence on others' emotions. And the leader's state of mind defines the upper critical limit for the state of mind of the people they lead. So it's not just the mood that we're in, it's around what we're creating and what we're projecting. And I would say that's the case in the room, and maybe even more the case when we're doing this online, right? Is people are watching the facilitator or the leader and getting energy from that person, and it does pass. Yawns, sneezes, right? Those things are contagious. So is state of mind and emotion. So all the more reason for us to be really tapped into how we're doing in this space. The other piece of really important research around this area is this one, which says, what makes someone credible and trustworthy? So 38% is determined by voice, tone, and tempo. 55% is through body language, which means 93% of building trust and credibility is communicated through the body. Okay, so voice, energy. You can imagine, if you do the math, how much of trust and credibility is gained through the words. If you do the math, that's roughly 7%, which is when I now apologize to all the marketing professionals on the call, right? Like, words are important, images are important, but when you get off this call, you're gonna remember how you felt on this call. Were you uplifted? Were you inspired? Were you bored? Were you agitated? Were you provoked? This research has been done. These stats come from 30 years of research about not only what people retain, but that the credibility of the experience is so much relies on the presence of the leader or the facilitator. And that's why this stuff really, really matters. So to this point, what I want to say is you want to figure out what's your practice in the online space, okay? If you're going to show up, what is your practice? Do you need to breathe? Do you need to work out? Do you need to stretch? Do you need to drink 3 cups of coffee? Do you need to stroke your dog or pet your cat? Like, for you to show up to be the person you want to be, it's not just a meeting 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12. It's what are you doing for yourself to show up and be the person that you want to be in that situation. That's both in the room and online. You know, I remember that back in the old days when I'm going somewhere to teach or to facilitate, I had a standing gig at a corporation in Northern Virginia, and I would be teaching from 9 to 5 leadership presence. Let me tell you something. My world between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., I have no words for it. I have 4 kids, right, who all have to be like, get up, dressed, fed, some medicated, packed to 3 different schools, right? By the time I get in my car to get on the Beltway, which is a disaster, I'm like ready for a bottle of Jack Daniels. Like my day is done. I arrive at 9 o'clock to teach about leadership presence, and I've just been trying to survive the last 3 hours of my life. So I have very specific practices that I would do right from in the parking lot of what I would do before I went upstairs to be the person that I needed to be. Well, what's happening now? That same madness is happening in my house, but I only have 1 flight of stairs of transition, right? I'm basically going from the basement in the first floor up to my office. That's maybe 12 stairs, right? I have 4 kids being homeschooled right now. My husband's working in the kitchen. Like, it's crazy town in my house. And by the way, it looks so peaceful because this is the room that I aspire to have one day. This is my aspirational home. This is not my home, in case any of you were wondering. I have a green screen and a beautiful picture. What's behind this screen, you don't want to see, okay? So, you know, there's very particular practices that I've had to adapt to move. And by the way, when I'm at work in Northern Virginia, I'm at work. As many of you know, my day is like total interval training. I have to run downstairs to this and help this one get online, this, and I'm with you. So there are these constant micro moments of having to step in and step out and step in and step out. So we have to think about what are those micro centering or micro intentionality things that we can do. Now for me, I tend to center through movement as opposed to like stillness and breath. So I've had to come up with my practices to be able to get myself in the right headspace. And a lot of times what that is for me is a data dump. It's that in between these calls, I just have to sit down and write down everything I feel, everything I need to do, everything that's on my mind, and I just have to like get it down so I can return to you. It is a bit somatic. I'm writing it furiously, so it feels more athletic. You need to figure out what your practice is. We cannot expect in this moment of time to transition so quickly from experience to experience without those moments of transition. And we don't necessarily have the luxury to tune everything else out because we're home, right? The other thing that I'll say is just the confession piece that's important. I find so often when people get up to speak in public and they say, thank you so much for having me. Just so you know, I have like a real fear of speaking in public. And I think, really? Because now I really want to listen to you. Like, no, that's for you to keep in here. I mean, there's one thing to like authentically connect with your audience. And there's another thing to move into confession mode. I'm really not a fan of Zoom. I've never done this online before. I've never put people in breakout rooms. So bear with me because, I might mess it up. Like, you don't actually need to tell me that, because now I'm expecting that to happen, right? It's just like when someone says, I hope you'll forgive my very thick accent. All I hear is the accent, as opposed to, so excited to be here with you today. I don't even hear it. So sometimes we feel like in the spirit of transparency, we just name all of our stuff and how we're feeling, but then that actually hijacks the learner from being able to really do the learning. So there's a distinction between confession and relating and connecting with your audience. And I just want you to be mindful of that from the very start. So before we go into some of the basic skills and tools around presence, does anyone have any initial questions or thoughts that they want to share? And you can go ahead and take yourself off mute. Okay, what I just practiced with you was called the 1 sip pause. Hold on, I see something in chat. I'm seeing in chat, headset versus using computer mic for presence. Oh, thank you so much. My answer is it depends. It depends who's in your world. Are you sharing your room with someone? I'm in a totally separate space right now, and I prefer to use the computer mic because I don't want like anything attached to me. I feel like it limits my presence. But if I'm in any zone where there's other people around or close by, I feel like I would use the headsets. So I think it depends on what your setup is. Yep. 1 sip pause. Whenever I ask a question to the audience, or if I ask for a volunteer, I do this. First of all, it models hydration. Although let's be honest, I'm typically sipping coffee. Second of all, it's just the perfect amount of time to see if you have any questions or to see if a volunteer will show up. I see the 1 sip pause. You just did it, right? It's just to see if anyone wants to participate. But the thing is that no one has to have anxiety because I'm just here all good sipping my water. So you don't have to worry about taking care of me and volunteering because I'm all good. But it gives like a 3 to 5 seconds for you to decide if you have a question. Look at that 1 sip pause. I like it. Now everyone's getting very self-conscious about it. And that's it. We're good. We're moving on here. The 1 sip pause. It works every time. All right, let's keep going here. So a couple of things about your presence here. The getting started piece. So you want to make sure that you're showing up early. Making sure that all the equipment works. If you're doing a Google Doc or mural, making sure that the mural works, testing it out. The practice the 1 sip pause. It's right there. Look at that. Looking at the camera lens. So this is a piece that's super important. So if you see right now I'm looking at the green button on my screen, and it looks like I'm looking at each of you smack in the eye, right? But if I go down now and now I'm looking at Emily straight in the eye, dead straight in the eye, but it looks like I'm looking down. So it's just that this is probably the biggest challenge for me in Zoom because I am someone who wants to connect with each of you and looking at you in the eye, but then it looks like I look distracted. So to the extent that you can be staring at that green light, I like to put something on top of my computer. Like sometimes I put like a little picture, or so it's like I'm actually talking to a human and not just the green light. Or I say to my class, I just want to let you know that I'm more comfortable looking at you in the eye. So it might seem like I'm looking down, but it actually means that I'm locking and loading with each of you. I just name it and let them know that that's my style and that's my preference. A couple other things is staying on mute, right? Which we talked about when we're not talking, and then having paper nearby. I always have paper nearby as a facilitator, and just to keep me completely present, I'm gonna share with you all of my secret tricks. The only thing I have near me is this. This right now is 9 slides on a page of this presentation. Now I'm gonna be honest, even with glasses, I cannot read a single word of this. Thank you, pandemic. I think that I can't see anything anymore. I can't see anything, but I can see what slide is coming next. Now I'll be honest, I know what slide is coming next because I'm ridiculously prepared for this webinar because that's what I owe to you. But it just gives me that reminder of kind of where we are, what the next slide is, mostly why I have this paper. anything that comes up in my mind that I want to tell you, a story, a metaphor, a quote, something I want to remember, I write it down right next to me. What else am I writing? Just to be really honest, try and reserve that beach house, pick up the dry cleaning, roast the cauliflower. Will Lior ever have hip hop class again? Like what, like anything that comes into my mind, I am writing down on this paper. Why? One, Confucius said, even the palest ink is better than the sharpest memory, right? So if I write it down, I know it's there. But mostly I'm writing it down because if I don't, I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes obsessing about that thing that I don't want to forget. And then I'm not really with you. Like I'm with you 82%, but you're here for 100% of my brain bandwidth, not 82%. So if I just get it down, I'm just clearing the highway and I'm back. I clear the highway and I'm back. Same thing I do in the room. When I'm teaching in the room, I never look at notes. I have this off to the side with the pen just so I can write down whatever's coming up in my head. Really important key to presence. It also allows you to not have any other window open on your computer because you have paper. Okay. So the idea is, the other thing about presence is just being clear on your role. We won't spend too much time on this, but being clear about how you want, like I said in the beginning, I'm going to be mostly presenting and then we'll be able to ask questions, asking for people's engagement, removing distractions we did. And I would say body language can be deceiving in terms of in the room, if I see someone doing this, I'm thinking, oh, they're thinking so deeply about what I'm saying. But online, if I see someone doing this, I could think, oh, they're definitely talking to one of their kids or they're definitely, you know, making grilled cheese right now. I don't know. I really don't know. It's hard to tell. So can we give people the benefit of the doubt that they're present? I like seeing everyone's faces. We have probably half the people on this call with faces, or not, that was not a public shaming to turn on your cameras. Not at all. It was exactly the opposite. My partner in this work, Brian, he actually asked people to all turn their cameras off. He's more introverted and he finds the screen to be like just overwhelming with so much, you know, content and details. And I feel like it's really important in this moment of time to give people like free will and choice and autonomy on how they want to show up. If you want to turn off your camera, like I am not your parent, I am not your parole officer. Like you have to take ownership of your learning. And if resting your eyes or if this screen is too busy for you, then turn it off and you go do you. I can only create a container. I can only create a pathway for you to be engaged, but I can't force you. And so it's, you know, being clear with people if you are really asking them to be on camera because you want to see their faces, or if you're allowing them the choice to be on or off and people take ownership for their own learning, I find to be really important. And then finally, this last piece here, oh my gosh, Lisa Robbins, I love you. If I needed a parole officer, I'd want you as mine. Yeah, you would, because I'd be so easy. I would let you do whatever you want. P.S. I'm the good parent. My husband's the bad cop. Okay. It takes two to facilitate virtually. It's very, very rare that I facilitate anything without a co-facilitator. Think the movie Grease, Danny Zuko and Kanicki. You want to have your second. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you have homework tonight to watch the movie Grease. Emily right now is my second, meaning she is covering the chat. She is covering the chat. And that means I can totally stay with you. Emily knows that at any point, if she sees something coming up on chat, or if she sees a theme emerging, she's going to politely interrupt me and say, Rae, you might want to cover this. It's the same thing. If I were putting you right now on Google Docs, if I were putting you on Mural, I would have a second facilitator who is totally on tech, right? So if someone was having a hard time logging in, that person would handle it, or they would go in a breakout room and help someone work it out. This work is not meant to be done alone. So that's really important. What's going to keep me most present is I know that Emily has got this. And if anyone's having a problem, I can direct them to her. That really enables me to be present. When, you know, I'm dealing with 50 people on my own, it's just they're not going to get the best of me because I'm also making sure that everyone can track with the technology. So that's something that's really important to think about. And let me tell you something, two things about that. If you are have shortage of resources, barter with people, right? say, I need you as my support for this hour, and I'm going to give you an hour of coaching, or I'm going to be your chavruta for an hour, or whatever it is. People want to be helpful right now. So let people help you in this. Okay. So a few more things about presence here is that a lot of this is in your preparation. And the more present you are, the more prepared you are, the more present you are. So I think that there are really 4 steps here. Knowing your audience, knowing what you're going to talk about, rehearsing, and preparing yourself and the room. What do I mean by this? We're going to quickly run through these things. The key to any presentation or any facilitation is the following. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them what you told them. That's it. We need to make the case for people's attention. We need to tell people where we're going, what the objectives are, and we need to make the case for their actual attention if we want them to be present. It is really, really important. The other thing about this idea of know what you're going to talk about is the following. People used to say to me all the time, how did you know to just bring in that example or tell that story or bring in that metaphor? Did you plan that? And I would say, no, I didn't plan it, but like this bird often flies into the window and just whispers this amazing example for me to share. And I don't know, it just comes to me. And then people would say, well, like, where do I buy the bird? And it just wasn't a satisfying answer to my students. And then one of my students many years ago said to me, no, Rae, you're just practicing like a fundamental Buddhist concept, which is that spontaneity favors the practice mind. I was like, what? And she was explaining to me that because I know my stuff so well, I never have to think about the next thing I'm going to say, right? I'm not thinking about the next slide or the next thing I'm going to tell you because I'm so prepared. Then everything is available to me. Like stories, history, funny things, random things. It's all available to you because your mind isn't all wrapped up on that next point because you're in flow. So again, this idea of really knowing your stuff, that's also what allows you to pivot. When you know so much about what you're doing, it allows you to be more flexible and more nimble to what's coming up in a room. The best facilitators in general are people who can take their agendas at any moment of time and turn it over and say, where do we need to go now, right? That's what we're striving for. So these next ones I'm just going to whip through relatively quickly, the idea about appearance. So I will say that in general, I know a lot of people feel like Zoom is so great because you can facilitate in your pajamas. I'm going to go with no. I'm going to go with no on that. I think that like if you show up in a suit and a tie, it's going to be weird, right? But I like this idea of sort of half step above your audience. And it's not so much of also what you're projecting to them, it's just how you feel in your skin. I'm never going to be comfortable facilitating my pajamas, just like I'm never going to be comfortable in the room facilitating in yoga pants. It's just not what I do. This idea of like of making sure that you're wearing something that you feel comfortable, that you feel professional in. This is still a professional setting, even though we're working from home. So just being really aware of like what's the look and the feel that you want to project, to make sure it's not too distracting, to make sure that you feel good in it, and to definitely make sure that you're checking your teeth. Because if there's anything on Zoom, people can really see your teeth when you're on Zoom. So that's something to notice post-lunch. Okay, so just like being really mindful of that whole area of appearance. Nonverbal skills. So I would say for this one, in terms of being online, is a few things. We've talked about eye contact already. And we also want to think about your distance to the screen. So if I'm way far back here, it seems like I'm in another universe. But if I'm talking to you right here, I mean, it's just awkward. So if you can think about, if you can even try it out right now, if you're sitting in your chair, if you put your arm out, can the tips of your fingertip or your middle finger, can it touch the screen? And that's in general a really good baseline for you to think about the distance that you want to have to the screen. Also, what a lot of people make a mistake in is that you basically want your mouth to be where the green light is. If it's not, often people will be looking up your nose. So I have right now, my laptop is on like an encyclopedia that's this thick so that I can be more level with my eye and the camera. So you're looking more straight at my face than looking up at me. So those are some things that you can test out with a trusted partner. How is the lighting looking? How is, right? And the other thing is, in terms of nonverbal skills, is we often think that we are cut off and limited by being in this box. But the truth is that we actually have a quite amount of animation that we can do. We have our arms, we have our hands, we have our shoulders, we have facial expressions, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can still have a tremendous amount of presence in your space. One of the things I like to say is, right now we have on the phone, we have 27 participants, right? So we're building a home with 27 windows. Each box is a window. And I'm looking into each one of these windows and seeing a person who is complex and creative, and I'm seeing your background and thinking about how can you animate and come alive in your window in this home as opposed to the box on my screen. So even looking at it in that way, I think helps you be more expansive with your body language. Okay, so facial expressions, same thing here. What I usually say in presentations is an idea of, imagine if I came onto the screen today and was like, I'm so happy to be here with you today, right? So that is an example in my world of where the audio doesn't match the video, right? What you're seeing is not aligned with what you're hearing. So when you're talking about something energetically, maybe you're leaning in or you're smiling more. Someone said to me recently that glasses are the performance stage for your eyebrows. Oh, it's the greatest thing I ever heard, right? So how can you, if we're talking about in general online, you're doing like 50% less content, you're probably doing 50% more presence and energy, right, to capture your attention. Now, that does not mean that you have to bring pom-poms. So sometimes one of my main co-facilitators, I might say on the phone, I might say on Zoom, oh my gosh, I'm going to share an exercise with you that is going to blow your mind. And if Brian says it, he'll say, I'm about to share something with you that I think is going to like change the way you think about things, right? It doesn't mean that one's better than the other. They both have the same amount of like energy and connection in them, except one is more like Rae Ringel-esque, like more animated, and Brian's is more like quiet intensity wise. But it doesn't make one better. It just means infusing more energy and connectivity into your own style to have that presence there. Okay. Same thing with verbal skills when you're talking online, just like you would in person. Being mindful about the words that you're choosing. No offensive language, no swearing. I will tell you something. I never, ever, ever curse when I'm teaching or facilitating it. And let me tell you something, I love to curse. I have a filthy mouth. You would never know it, ever. It would never happen in the professional setting. Oh, I'm gonna be cool if I drop the F-bomb? Like really, that's gonna make me cooler? No, it probably would be offensive or hurtful to someone. You keep the language clean, you keep the language simple, make sure that it's accessible. Be careful of the alphabet soup, especially in the Jewish community, the JFNA of the UJC, of the AJC, of the ACA, of the when you start talking in alphabet soup and acronyms, if someone's not tracking with you, all of a sudden you become exclusive, right? If you're using a lot of insider speak and people don't know, if you're going to abbreviate or use an acronym, spell it out first so everyone's on the same page. We shouldn't assume that everyone knows this. I just did the watching the ums and the likes. That's just really about your preparedness. Again, if you know what you're saying, the ums and the likes and the those are fillers when we don't really know what we're speaking about. But I love this idea about language being accessible. And I'm going to share with you this exercise that I love. And here's how it goes. Each of these is a proverb that I have made incredibly difficult. So I want you to go ahead and open up your chat. And for this first one, in the absence of the feline race, certain small rodents will give themselves up to various pleasurable pastimes. If you know what that proverb is, go ahead and write it in the chat. When the cat's away, the mouse will play. Excellent. Well done. Okay, number 2. Impetuous celebrity engenders purposeless spoilage. What do you think that one is? When the cat's away, the mice will play. Wow, you're all really good at this. Okay, whoops, sorry. Provide the privilege of enfranchisement, or I will feel that life is not worth living. What do you got? Give me liberty or give me death. Beautiful. Rabbi Simon, you're really good at this. Not that we're having a competition. And finally, the last one, a condition characterized by tardiness is more desirable than one that is systematically marked by eternal absenteeism. What do we have? Better late than never. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, do you see my point? How often are people speaking in this way? When you actually can just keep it tight and short and concise. It's not dumbing it down. It's just actually being thoughtful with your words. It's not, you know, more is more, right? It's less is more. And let's just make sure that our language is accessible and is tight. Okay, I'm gonna open it up for let me stop sharing for a moment and open it up to questions that you're having at this moment, anything related to presence. You can go ahead and take yourself off mute. Are there things we can do to help participants with their presence? Yes. So the things that you can do to help them with their presence, and we'll go over these in the last couple of minutes, are lots of different modalities and exercises to keep it going. So I have, this is not a call on design, but obviously I have many, many, many things to say about how we design online experiences. I'm actually not typically a webinar fan, because my belief is that no speaker should ever be talking for more than 10 to 15 minutes without doing something, So I will give you, I'm gonna give you an example of this for a moment. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Yes. So we just, no, that's not what I'm looking for. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. Do you see this here? It looks like a bunch of people working out. Can you see it on my screen? Yes? Yes. Okay. So we just published an article by Harvard Business Publishing. Yay, this week. I'll send you the link. I actually put the link in the chat. And this is a new approach to online facilitation. So if any of you who do HIT, high impact interval training, we've taken that exercise methodology and imposed it onto virtual meetings. So basically the theory is high intensity of activity and then periods of rest and recovery. If it's great for our bodies, it's great for our minds too. So talking, learning, teaching 10 to 15 minutes, and then application, breakouts, writing, Q&A, reflection, journaling, whatever. Go back to the intensity of the learning, and then off the interval, right? Of application, practice, talking, sharing. Does anyone have any questions? Endless. So if you have an hour curriculum, it is now split up into 10 to 15 minute chunks. And it's a whole different way to design online. Obviously I have like 12 hours to talk to you about that. I'll put the link to this article in this chat so you can see it. And it really walks you through this idea of how to look differently at your content as a way to keep your people engaged. The hour-long lecture is no other. When people say to me, how do we do, like the CEO wants to do a State of the Union with 100 people, how do we make it interactive? And you know what I say? You don't. If you want to do that, have your CEO record it and let people watch it in their pajamas or when they're walking in the woods. Let them listen to it beforehand. And then when you get online, have, you know, breakout groups or discussion or Q&A. We have to think differently about the content. And that's how we keep people engaged, is constantly 10 minutes on, 10 minutes off, 15 minutes on, 5 minutes off, 20 minutes on, 10 minutes off. Like, it's just a different way of thinking about your content. Another question here is, how do you think this applies to our presence to colleagues, not just when facilitating outwards? Whew, I think it's even more so the case. And that's actually, if there's good trust and connectivity within, with your team, that also might be a great way to give each other feedback on how we're doing on this space. What's getting in the way in our presence? What would be more helpful about how we're designing our meetings to help each other collaborate better or help each other be more present? Is there a way to actually name that and make it part of like a team building or a group building exercise? Presence comes from within, an inner state that yields external behaviors. Many of these strategies you have shared are behaviors. Can you speak more about cultivating that inner quality? Whew, that is such a great question. Andrea, I'm not sure I understand. Do you mean about like belief in your own presence? You can go ahead and take yourself off mute. Tell me a little bit more about what you mean.
So if it wasn't obvious, I was quoting one of the leadership quotes that you had on the earlier slide, which really resonated for me, and I had written down just my own little version of it. And so I'm finding everything that you're saying so helpful and really interesting, but I'm also noticing that so much of it is about things that we do to create presence, or in the ways that we control the way we're appearing and the way we are in the camera and on Zoom. And I guess from a leadership perspective, I'm thinking about that quote, and it sounds like, at least the way I read the quote, or what you said about the fourth grader, right, who has so much, I can't remember the word. Is it presence?
Yeah.
So like, where does that come from? I guess it's like probably maybe too big a philosophical question to put at you.
No, it's a pretty big question for the last 6 minutes, but I will do my best at answering it. I love that you're even asking the question. And I think, I think, Andrea, for me, it's making I'll give you this example. For all the coaching clients I work with, I used to make them do a practice when they went from their car to the elevator or up the elevator to their office. And I used to make them ask the question, who's walking into the room when I'm walking into the room? They're like, what do you mean? I'm walking into the room. And what I found is people spend so much time thinking about what they need to do that day. And I'm making them change the question to, who do I want to be? Mm-hmm. The irony is, like, all we think about is the doing, but we're actually called human beings and not human doings. Simply asking the question, who do I want to be in this call? How do I want to show up, as opposed to what do I want to project or convey? Or you can look at it, Andrea, as we spend so much time thinking about what we want to say. As a matter of fact, we're not usually listening to other people because we're constructing our own contribution. Instead of thinking about what you want to say, first think about, what do I want my words to do? What's my intention? Then you might not even want to say something. So it's this idea of tapping into, who do I want to be in this? How do I want to show up? How do I want my words to land? As opposed to, what do I want to do? What's my objective? What point am I trying to get across? And I think even tapping into those bigger questions is going to have an impact on your presence.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Debbie, if you sense yourself losing the crowd in virtual training meeting, what are some good ways to shake it up and bring people back? So there's a whole piece, and again, in the article that I'll send to you, there's a whole piece about this in terms of breaks. So I like doing breaks. I like mixing in like a mini modality where I'll have them, I'll do some prompt, and I'll literally, if we have enough time, have each person go off I'll say, something I've noticed about myself in the last month is ... And they have to write that down, write the thing that they noticed about themselves, and then they have to put a period at the end of the sentence. Then they have to turn the piece of paper over, right? And by doing that, then I ask each person to go off mute and read their sentence. So first of all, it keeps the time short. People don't go over because they have to read their complete sentence. Second of all, they listen to everyone else because their contribution is turned over. And lastly, they trust their gut and they're not rewriting the whole time while everyone else is participating. So things like that, having them rename themselves with the name tag on Zoom, having them write something on chat. I'm saying, I'm going to call on each of you depending on how I see you on my screen. People don't want to be humiliated, and so they're more willing to step in the game and participate. Josh, there are lots of these Zoom sessions from all sorts of organizations right now that aren't interactive. Any advice on how to be more present when you're simply watching any of these interview or panel type talks? Fidgets? I have like all around my desk. I have snacks. I have fidgets. I take myself off Zoom screen and I stretch on the floor. Mostly for me, Josh, I have to take notes. I have to write it down. I try and get colored pens. I try and just like, if I hear a point that I like or have a question about, I have to have like another. I'm not someone, the way that I learn is I have to hear it, right? I have to practice it, and then I have to teach someone else. And then once I teach someone else, it's mine. That's like my way of learning in the world. So just hearing just like that of someone talking at me is really, really hard. So I have to like write it down, and then later on at dinner, like tell one of my kids or tell someone else about it or apply it somewhere else, and then it's mine. So I would just push back and say, like, what is your mode of where you learn best? And whatever that is, apply that to this, because it's really hard, really hard.
Hey, Rae, Yael also had a question, if you have time.
I saw Yael. Yael, I'm ready. Hi, Yael.
Hi, good to see you. Two quick questions, but you may only have time for one. So I know the key is to prepare and be ready. And recently I've been leading a lot of webinars, whether it's kind of informal check-in with some of our partners or like a more academic presentation and conversation. And I get nervous when I present, so I do in person and virtually like to have notes in front of me. So what's the best way of being present when, so I guess I don't have a printer at home. I don't have access to a printer. So my notes are also written, which then makes it hard because if I'm sharing my screen, I realize this 2 minutes before my call, I can't actually read my notes online while I'm sharing my screen. Or I could take them by hand, but then I'm like looking down. So is there a good way to do this?
Yeah, you just have to make a storyboard. You have to have something behind your computer screen, like a piece of cardboard or oak tag, and whether it's Post-it notes or whatever it is, like make your storyboard. And you just literally, like, this is arts and crafts. You just have to post your keywords or your key notes, and it has to be behind your computer, preferably on, that's what I did when I record videos and I don't want to forget key points. I have a screen behind my screen, but you'd have something like a poster board or oak tag or flip chart paper, whatever it is, or even a wall right behind your computer, sort of on the level of where your camera is, so it doesn't look like you're too much like this, right? So have it close by, and you just create your storyboard. Now, I wouldn't have like word for word for word for word, but some salient points, key sentences, and you're golden.
Great. Thanks. And then just a question about having that co-facilitator is really important, but is there a limit? Like if I have a presentation and the other 4 staff members want to be on just to listen on and be part of it, is there like a ratio of too many people on the kind of staff side versus participants?
I don't think so. If you're transparent about it, that people are there to learn, or they're going to be not taking an active role, but they're really there to observe. I think as long as you name it, it's all kosher. Now, if it's 1 lay leader and 5 staff, that's weird, right? So you have to think about it might not be weird, but you just want to think about the numbers there. But I think it's all good as long as you're above board and just explaining who's playing what role. So I know we're at time. I just wanted to show you one more thing, and then I will give you this link here. Let me just pull up the PowerPoint again. Okay. So the rest of the pieces here are just some ideas that are pretty easy to follow along in terms of ways to keep your participants engaged. I have here different ways that you can open the session, different things about different ideas, things you can do in chat using your name tag, group go around, get them into breakouts. I have some examples for you of ways to get them started in breakout groups. Some thoughts for you here about how to maintain momentum, keeping them present, finishing strong. And remember, the last thing you do in your session is the one that they remember the most. So closing and thinking about how you want to end. And ending isn't really an ending. An ending is opening to what's next. So is there a call to action, or people making commitments? What do they want to commit to moving forward? And then this, of course, is my favorite. You know, for every presentation or facilitation you do, there's really 3, the one you prepare, the one you deliver, and the one you do in the car ride home, or in our case, the one you do on the walk downstairs. So it's this idea of like, when you're doing this work, can you be in a place of self-practice and observation, like noticing what worked well, what didn't work well, how was your timing, how was your agenda, where did you feel your presence going big, where did you feel it getting more interrupted. This is also a great moment in time to be watching others, really watching how other people are doing this work. What's capturing your attention? What's really hooking you in? Where do you tend to tune out? Is that the facilitator? Is that the time of day? Like, just start noticing for yourself, where do you tend to be more present and where do you tend to be less present? What you're feeling in that space is what other people are feeling as well. So it'll help you be more empathetic and get into the minds of others in terms of what helps them to be present or not. And finally, you can just ask your participants or your groups or your students or immerse with them. What's most helpful to them? Do they like more breaks or less breaks for longer? Do they like watching clips or watching clips beforehand and then discussing? Like, ask your people what's helping them to be present. So obviously there's so much more, but these are just some initial quick tools to help you get started. And that's really all I have here. I'm very happy to stay on and take one or two more questions if you have them. And let me go ahead and throw this link in the chat for you so you all have it before you jump off. 1 second. Here's the article, and please feel free to spread widely. Okay, I'm putting it in chat. Great. Okay. Any other last questions before we jump off? Okay. Well, I thank you all so much. I wish you luck and good health, and to please be in touch if you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.